Welcome students in this e-learning class. Today I am going to discuss the story Lihaaf or the Quilt written by Sem-II. This lecture is primarily meant for the semester 2 students of program course. You see, Lihaaf in Urdu, whose English translation is the Quilt. This story by Sem-II is very significant because it has a multidimensional aspects and it also simultaneously critiques the apparent gender norms and the prevalent heterosexual exposition of our society. Right? So basically it is a critique, a scathing critique against what we call as the heteronormativity. When this heterosexual orientation is considered as normal by the society. Now, Sem-II was born in in a Muslim household, but she was educated and very liberal, right? And many of her family members were married to Hindus. So she grew up in an atmosphere where there is an intercultural exchanges between Hindus, Muslims and Christians, and therefore this very secular kind of ambience, secular kind of atmosphere had structured her liberal and progressive thoughts. Particularly this story, which was first published in Urdu titled Lihaaf and later in English as The Quilt, was published in the year 1942, written in the previous year 1941. It was published in the Journal of Lahore. So see, the time is before independence, and at that time society was not ready to accept these notions regarding homosexuality. Now you see, one basic thing that you need to know is that in our society, in this world, heterosexual orientation or heterosexual behavior is considered as the normal. Right? It is the standard gender stereotype, sexual stereotype. Whatever goes beyond this heterosexual perception, we term as unnatural, abnormal. Right? There are 4 categories apart from heterosexuality. Nowadays, we have invented or we have come with a term called the LGBT, where L stands for lesbian, sexual relations between a woman and a woman. G stands for gay, sexual relation between a man and a man. B is for the bisexual, any human being who feels sexually attracted, inclined towards both the sexes. A man or a woman who is attached or who is inclined to both man and woman. Right? And T at the last stands for transgender. Right? In Bangla, we use the pejorative word for them is hijre. So transgender are those people who stand in a between position between the male and the female. Right? The most common used term in Bangla would be ubholingo or ubhokami. So this is the LGBT, and in India and across the world, this LGBT is regarded as a separate sexual community. And in most cases, anywhere in the world, it may be in Europe, in America, the so-called progressive nation, or it may be in the third world countries like India or Pakistan or the Myanmar, etc. It can be any countries, but everywhere the situation is same. This LGBT community is marginalized. They cannot freely express their sexual behavior. They are often this is heterosexual people turned violent against these people. So they are sexually victimized, they are physically victimized, and they are also psychologically and socially marginalized. Now, Ismat Chugtai wrote this story when, at the time, when even to talk about sex was unbelievably courageous, and it was also dangerous. And this writer's position is vividly depicted and outlined in this story, the quilt, and it signifies, it indicates that a woman should never suppress their physical need for love and sex. Now, very quickly, I shall go through the outline of the story. The first instance that we come across regarding this story is that it is narrated through the eyes of a 9-year-old girl, a little girl, who is yet to reach her puberty. So that unnamed narrator, that little girl, has no exposure, has no experience regarding sexuality. And that is why most of the incidents taking place, most of the happenings in the story are merely suggestive. It is only for the adults, we the adult human beings can perceive and can realize what is actually going on in that Muslim household. The story proceeds with the perspective of the narrator with a small innocent girls, and deals with certain things considered as obscene or tabooed, sexually tabooed. However, due to the age of the narrator, as I have already told, the themes manifested in the story are suggestive. Nothing is directly indicated. So the young girl is the niece of an important character. She is the only female protagonist of the story, who is the Begum Jan. And Begum Jan is married to a very wealthy Muslim lord named Nawab. And this man, the husband of Begum Jan Nawab, is praised, is highly acclaimed in his community because of his morally and ethically upright standard, right? While the story is told from the point of view of that unnamed little 9-year-old girl, it is essentially about the life of Begum Jan, and not only her life, but also the domestic drudgery, and she being the victim of patriarchal subjugation. There is a substantial age difference between Nawab and Begum Jan. The husband commands and respects, for a number of reasons, because he has never gone to any brothel, he has never visited any nautch girl or prostitute. And very similarly, if you read the story, you will find the line where Begum Jan is installed in that domestic household. It is a very, very striking treatment on part of the author, because she is installing a female individual. Now, install the word install is applicable in terms of commodity, a thing, not living beings, not a human being who is alive, who has his or her own consciousness, own senses. So as if a Begum Jan is a human being, is a female, but she has no voice of her own. That is why we can install Begum Jan, we can install a female individual in a domestic household and subject her for eternal domestic drudgery or sexual oppression. Now we also find that this Nawab, who is the Begum Jan's husband, he is a person performing patriarchal stereotypes. He himself also feels contempt for everything disgusting and appreciates beauty. And there is an indication in the story, because he opens a house full of, and he actually gives entrance to beautiful, attractive male individual, male students. So there is an indication in the story that he is also homosexual. but he cannot openly profess, he cannot openly proclaim his sexual stance. That is why, in order to hide his sexual orientation from the society, he had married Begum Jan. And so, in a certain way, this Nawab is also the victim of heteronormativity, the prevalent gender norms existing in a patriarchal society. Not only Begum Jan is being victimized, but in a certain degree, in a certain way, her husband is also victimized, because he cannot openly tell or openly express his physical desire, physical yearnings. Now, two or three things which I'd like to mention is that the story is set, the time is not clear, the place is also not clear, but it is somewhere in the east, a country where Islam predominates. And you see, especially in case of Islam, in case of pre-independent Muslim society, there were corruptions, there were many people, a large part of the society were victimized, were marginalized in terms of education. They did not receive the light of Western education, and it laid for them a life of eternal exploitation, not only physical slavery but also psychological slavery. Right? So, Isma Chuktai is essentially talking about a community or a part of a community which is subjected to deprivation, deprived from education, deprived from liberty, both in terms of physical, sexual, and psychological, and it is also deprived from the taste of refined culture. Right? It is narrated from the first person point of view, and the climax of the story reaches its climax when this unnamed narrator found that Begum Jan is involved in a sexual act, right, sexual copulation with her servant, a girl named Rabbu, under the quilt. So the story ends here, and although the writer does not make anything clear through the perception of that little 9-year-old girl, but we, the readers, the adult human beings, are quite aware of their reality. We understand what actually have taken place in that household, that Begum Jan is a lesbian individual, right? So in my next lecture, in part 2, I shall be discussing the critical aspects of this story.